Hello there. I'm Martin. He's Rob. How are you? Good to see you. What a full house. This is very cool. Thank you so much for being here. Again, always a pleasure to be back at the Ann Arbor District Library. I'm Martin Bandyke, longtime host of the morning show on 107.1, retired 13 months ago, still doing a weekend show, a Sunday show called Fine Tuning. And it's just a real pleasure to always be here with you for author events. And as soon as I heard that this man was adapting his podcast into a book, I was on the phone to the library and said, can I please get him here from Columbus, where he's currently living, to talk about his incredible book. It's called 60 Songs That Explain the 90s, and it is very much a companion to his top music Spotify podcast that started during the depths of the pandemic. So once again, let's hear it for Rob Harvilla. It's good to be here with you, Rob.
I feel bad about the second row, that's my coat in the second row, which I reserve for my children.
It's his fault.
It's like 50-50 whether you want my children to arrive. I think we're better off that they not for the time being. Let's make the most of it before this room is destroyed. But I'm sorry about the second row.
So let's go back to the start of the podcast. When was the first one?
First one was like October 2020. So yeah, it was the summer of 2020. This is very much a pandemic operation, right? Like I'm barricaded in my house. Mm-hmm. My wife is pregnant. We can't really go anywhere. Like my social skills have deteriorated. You know, it's just I'm barricaded in my home office. It's like it's time to start a podcast. Was my thought on it. And so yeah, we started talking about it in the summer. It launched officially in October of 2020. It's a very strange sensation in that it's been like 3.5 years. I can't tell if it feels longer or shorter than that, but it's been a while now.
And it was originally envisioned to be 60 songs.
It was.
And you are now at 117?
I am writing the 119th episode of this show. I am 4,500 words into it right now. I don't know what happened. We really screwed this up. 90 songs felt like too many. I was like, no one's going to like this show, and it's going to be embarrassing when they cancel me after 4 episodes. I don't want to be that guy. But 30 was too few, so it's like, 60, yeah, sure. But 60 is also an embarrassing number of songs to get canceled after 4. But yeah, we stuck with that. And then I got up into the 40s, and it's like, I don't want to stop doing this yet. Like, I haven't talked about, there were so many songs that I wanted to do still, and I had to convince them to let me go up to 90 and then go up to 120. And then they're like, please do not ask us again. Like, you need to stop, please. Thank you for your service, but it's time to stop. I have a lot of anxiety about stopping. Like, I still feel like I'm leaving a lot on the table, a lot of songs, a lot of micro eras. It's like the cherry poppin' daddies deserve their moment in the sun, and it could still happen. I could wake up tomorrow and just be like, I got to do Zoot Suit Riot right now, and I have that power.
You do.
For 2 more weeks.
You are Midwesterner, born and raised outside of Cleveland, currently living in Columbus.
Yeah,
and you have very much, and I love it, a Midwestern sensibility to your book, to your podcast, which is very open and very fun, and there's just not an elitist feel to your writing or podcasting, and I just find it so refreshing.
Well, thank you. That's awesome.
And so compelling. How did the podcast start to morph? I mean, if you listen to the very first one you did in 2020, the one about You Ought to Know with Alanis Morissette, and then you listen to maybe ones a few months or a few years after that, they're really quite a bit different in your approach.
They're 10 times longer, is what you're saying.
For starters,
the first episode was like 2,500 words, and then I got to I wrote 10,000 words about Pantera. That's actually probably the single craziest thing that I've ever done on a personal or professional level. They got way longer, first of all. I don't know what happened there, but I've been keeping track. I have a spreadsheet of how many words I have written, and it is probably 700,000. It's just an obscene quantity of words. It's just too many words. There they are. I guess that means I got more comfortable, right? Like, I'd never done anything like this before. Like, I did college radio or whatever, but I was no kind of professional radio person. I just been a critic, and It was a weird sensation to me at first, but as I got more comfortable, they just got longer and they got more digressive, and I didn't start out thinking I would talk about myself, about my family about anything, personal at all. And I don't really, but I did get a little bit, more comfortable in that way just because of the feedback I was getting, right? Like the parasocial nature, I'm sure you find this in radio, but in podcasting, right? Like just the idea that I'm in people's ears, like they're driving and they're listening to me that's such an intimate, like they're mowing the lawn or they're washing dishes. Like these are very important activities to me. And like I take the soundtrack to those activities very seriously. And I take it's a great responsibility to be apparently myself, the soundtrack for other people doing that now. And I just got to tell these people about my life, as they mow the lawn. And that's what I try to do.
It's interesting, though. I have found that as a radio host, for so much of the time, I want to stick to, just the facts. We listen to whatever this Talking Heads track or Dave Matthews Band track, but the most response I get from someone on the radio is making it personal and talking about the stupid question that I asked David Bowie when I met him. Nothing about music. I asked what kind of cologne he wore.
I was going to
ask. I don't know why I did that. But
did he tell you?
He did.
Was it like like high karate or something?
No, it was cool. It was
cool.
Yeah, it was David Bowie.
It was like moon vapor.
Yeah. Or else on a serious side, you kind of want to keep emotions in check. But
Sure.
And speaking of Bowie, it was that horrific day. It was my first day back at work after the holidays, and I woke up, looked at my phone. It was like, David Bowie has passed away. I'm like,
right.
No.
Right.
No. And then I was on the air. I lasted about 5 seconds, and I was just sobbing. Ugh. And it went on and on like that to the point where I apologized to the listeners. Like, I am so sorry that I am just like, I can't seem to talk about David Bowie with that.
But that's a beautiful thing, though.
I would get calls, and it's like, will you stop it? Like, that's what we're listening to you. Like, we're crying too. Like, you were
okay.
like,
all right.
this is, they're not, like, we're with you. Like, and I think that's what's going on with the personal nature, the personal things that you get into.
It's just that's just me and Chumbawamba instead of David Bowie. That's the only difference. But no, I know what you mean. Absolutely.
Well, in your latest podcast, you talk about Jay-Z, and it was again moving me because you were talking about radio.
Yeah. The Funk Master Flex, premiere of Otis is like a classic radio moment. But growing up in Cleveland, I had WMMS. I had the Buzzard. I remember when the alternative station launched by playing REM's "It's the End of the World as We Know It" and "I Feel Fine." Like for a day, it was like a 24-hour marathon. I love talking to people who remember that day, like driving to school with their moms and hearing it, and getting out of school and hearing it on the radio. And I've loved radio, and I miss the days when I was beholden to the radio and it was my only option. It's like it's just to think about the '90s. To think about I could buy a CD for $20 like once a month, but I could listen to the radio or I could listen to MTV. And I could steal my friends' CDs, and that was it. That's all I had access to, and just how much I relied on the radio back then, and like taping songs off the radio, right? And just like the Sweater song by Weezer, it's like I just sat there like with my hand on the record button, waiting for the doo-doo-doo-doo, and you get it a few seconds late. And so then you listen to that tape over and over again, and then canonically for you, the song starts 5 seconds late. And that's all of that is so important to me. And in Columbus, what made me think of it, and I think maybe talk about the radio more recently, is Columbus has a great radio station, I guess, called CD 101. It was like an independent alternative rock station, that we sort of knew was an anomaly and knew was a great gift to have in just a city, just a normal Midwestern city like we are. And we finally sort of lost it, a couple weeks ago. And I was just so sad about it, and it got me thinking about Funk Master Flex, and next thing I know, I'm reciting the 10 Commandments, into a microphone. And I don't know how these things happen, but they do.
Talk about how the book morphed, how the podcast get turned into a book. How were you approached by a publisher, or how did that all come about?
I think at some point I realized that I had 600,000 words of raw material, and it's like I'm just going to print this up, and just let it fly, And then I tried to picture the physical object that book would represent, like just the biblical doorstop nature of it. It's like maybe we should try and nail this, shorten it into an actual book-like object. And how would I do that, right? Like I wanted something that ideally it's these are monologues, right, that I do, and they're scripted down to the word. Like I thought I would be able to freestyle or something eventually, and I just cannot.
No,
And
it's
so
all
it's
scripted.
like,
Wow.
and I just talk to my wife my family can attest. I just talk to myself all day in my office. It's the most bizarre thing, right? I walk around the house and who are you talking to? It's like, I'm the podcast. I'm sorry. So, I wanted something ideally in the book, that some things are familiar from the podcast. There's sort of a greatest hits aspect to it,
right.
Modestly. But I also wanted it to be interesting to people who don't know the podcast at all, right? And all you really need to know is like, hey, jealousy or whatever, and hopefully you'll be fine. So I just wanted to get the songs interacting with each other, in unexpected ways. Like, can I get from Celine Dion to Hole, in one paragraph, and it's like, you can if you... I did. I don't know if it works, but I did it.
And you went, in one podcast, you went from Otis Redding to Sinead O'Connor.
Yes,
and I
I
thought
did.
That was really fascinating because I
She
didn't know
stole
where
the
you
song,
were
right.
going. Could you talk about that one? Because that was really neat, what you did there.
Right. It was. Thank you. Sinead was early. I want to say it was before she had passed. And I that was one of the early heavy ones. Right. It was when her book came out. I don't know if you've read Sinead O'Connor's memoir. I mean, I recommend it, but like I don't want to read it again. Like it's very it's heavy. It's it's very upsetting.
I'm sure,
It's direct. Right. And so I think that one. It's Otis Redding. He's live and he's introducing Respect, and he's like, here's a song that a woman took
Monterey
from me.
Pop Festival.
Right, yes, exactly. And he's like, here's a song that Aretha took from me, and I think the same thing happened. I think Sinead took Nothing Compares to You from Prince, so I try to make connections like that, right? And early on, I don't want to be digressive just for the sake of it. Like, I don't know where I'm going a lot of the time, and I think you can tell, but I'm trying to get somewhere. I'm trying to have a point. I am trying to put sort of discordant things together. Some of them are personal to me. Some of them are critical. Some of them are just totally out of left field. But that one is a little more coherent, hopefully. The idea, of a cover that becomes so canonical that like that's the version of the song that endures. And I think that's certainly the case with her and with Respect, of course.
Who of the many guests that you've had on your podcast is the guest that it's been the pinch me, I'm dreaming, I can't believe I'm talking to this person moment? Can you name a couple?
It's weird because my guests have usually been fellow critics, writers, podcasters. I had Sophie B. Hawkins on. Damn, I Wish I Was Your Lover. It's a great song. She was cool. Yeah, she was very cool. I talked to the dude from Eve 6, who's become like a cool Twitter guy. Like he was awesome. Like he was just sitting in a back patio, just vibing. That was pretty cool. It's the guests I've had on. I mean, the answer there would be Courtney Love, right? I didn't interview her. I was involved in an hour and 45-minute monologue by Courtney Love in which I occasionally said, "Oh, really? Like and that's the way I wanted it, right? Like that's what you want from her, right? Because it's so fascinating the way her brain works and the way that she can jump from thing to thing, and she jumps from just these really sharp, critical, analysis to like such personal things, and she'll get around to talking about, really harrowing, intimate details, of that time in her life, but she has to get there the way she wants to get there. And I'm just sort of along for the ride, and I'm thrilled, that she's doing it. But to be on a Zoom call with her, and she's got the handwritten lyrics to Smells Like Teen Spirit, and she's singing, the alternate lyrics to me. She's like, "Do you have a guitar?" It's like, "No, I don't have a guitar." Are you insane? Nobody wants that. But that by far is the wildest thing that's probably ever happened to me, in any sense. Just Courtney Love on my Zoom for 2 hours. I had to lie down after. I just lied down on the floor for a very long time.
So assuming you do wrap up the podcast at 120, do you have any idea what you're going to do?
I think we know what we're going to do next. I don't think we're going to announce it yet or anything.
Right.
We're going to be back. I will be back. Okay. I will be back later this year. We're not exactly sure how we're doing it yet or when. There's stuff to be worked out. But I have a lot of anxiety about leaving the 90s. You know, I almost extended it again, like just because it's hilarious to me when I do this. I just think it's the funniest thing in the world to have a wildly inaccurately named book and podcast. It just amuses me. And so part of me is like, I want to do 400 episodes of this show. And I want to get around to the cherry poppin' daddies, you know, and like everybody should wear sunscreen and like Dead-Eye Dick and so forth. But I think it's time to stop with the 90s. But I think there's a lot of options though, right? You know, it's like, do we do another decade? And if we do another decade, do we go forward or backward? Right. You know, do we do something completely different? But I really love this format, you know, the monologue format, I guess, and just the mixture of critical stuff and personal stuff and something that's hopefully conversational. Yeah. You know, this has been the most feedback I've ever gotten anything that I've done. You know, I've been a critic for 20 years, and I write my cute little reviews of like the new Drake record or whatever. And, like a couple people on Twitter yell at me, and that's it, right? But like to go from that to this, you know, the DMs that I get, the emails, you know, and it's not that I'm inherently interesting or anything, but I think the principle that I've discovered with this show is the same way songs, the more personal a song is, the more universal it feels. Mm-hmm. Somehow, like Counting Crows, right? Like Adam Duritz talks a lot about, you know, like a lot of proper names in his songs, a lot of names of cities, you know, and you don't know those people, and maybe you've not even been to those places, but still, like you feel, you know, driving up to Reseda sometime, or whatever the line is from Long December, like somehow it feels more intimate to you, even if you don't know what he's talking about, just because you know it's very personal to him. Mm-hmm. And I think something similar, you know, on a much smaller scale, but something similar happens with this show, where people just want to email me and tell me, you know, about the time that they were driving to Denny's listening to Dave Matthews when they were 14. It's like I love how spectacularly mundane many of my anecdotes are. It's like, then I drove to Eden Park, you know, and this song came on the radio, and it was this celestial light bathing, you know, the Saturn I was driving. It's like, who cares? But for some reason, that music from that time is so important to me, right? Like when I decided on the 90s at first, I could talk about how, you know, it's in the past, but it's not too far in the past feeling. Yeah. It still feels like it's present tense and it's affecting culture and music now. But then as I went on, I realized what drew me to the 90s is I was a kid in the 90s. I was a teenager. I was a high school. There you go. I was in high school. I was in college. You know, and the one thing I know for sure is like the music you love when you're a teenager is the music you'll love most in your life. You know, you'll always love music. You'll always love new music. You'll find new things to get into. But that relationship, you know, me listening to the Downward Spiral, unfortunately, like 10 billion times when I was 14 and like vibing like overly with it. You know, I'm never going to have that experience again. And that's for the best, obviously. But like I do cherish that relationship that I had with those songs at that time in my life. And I think that's what resonates for me. And I think that's what resonates to some degree with people listening.
Yeah. Do you mind talking about a chapter or two?
Of course not.
In the book, the women versus, in quotes, women in rock, I just found particularly fascinating and compelling, where you discuss songs by the Sundays, the Cranberries, Garbage, PJ Harvey, Alanis Morissette. This is an incredible list. Tori Amos, The Breeders, TLC, Sinead O'Connor, the aforementioned Sinead O'Connor, and Fiona Apple and Sheryl Crow.
Yeah.
You know, there are certain radio stations, thank God, not mine, but there were certain radio stations where they don't allow you to play more than one song in a row by female artists.
That's what they say about country radio now. That
it's like I never would have worked at a station. That's the dumbest, stupidest edict I've ever heard in my life. Anyway,
I'm thrilled to hear you say that.
Thank you.
I think there's the most harrowing moments for me going back and listening and researching is reading the press, you know, reading the interviews, reading the way that people wrote about Tori Amos, Fiona Apple, you know, Sarah McLachlan, you know, all the way up to Britney Spears. Like that moment a couple years ago where we did all these documentaries apologizing to Britney Spears for how we treated her in the 90s, and then she got sad about those, and we had to apologize to her for the apology documentaries we'd made, and just this loop that this causes. But it's to go back and read, you know, interviews with like PJ Harvey or whatever, like that's tough, you know. To Sinead O'Connor, you know, to read about the way Sinead O'Connor was treated after, you know, the Saturday Night Live, the Pope thing, you know, those are tough moments. But I remember as a kid, the women in rock covers, right? Courtney Love was on one, I think. Just it seemed like every other issue of Rolling Stone was a women in rock issue. I think Ann Powers, the great critic, I think she calls like 1993 the year of the week of the woman in rock or something. It's almost it's better than that, but it's something. Ann said it the best, I think. But I do remember as a teenager, that phenomenon and the way that they were grouped together, and like having a sense even then, it's like, this is a little weird. And just the way people talked about the Lilith Fair, right? Like, just think about how awesome that lineup is now. Like, that first Lilith Fair lineup has like Sarah McLachlan and like Tracy Chapman, and it's just such a monster lineup. But the way that it was treated is like this weird, anomalous like subgenre. Like, women in music is like a subgenre of music. It's such a bizarre idea, and that's, I never want to be like the enlightened like 2024 guy, like, scolding people for the way they acted back in the 90s, but those are sort of the moments, like reading old Rolling Stone issues, about, TLC after Andre Rison's House, like Fiona Apple after This World is BS, like, sorry. It's just the way that people would react, like even Bjork's swan dress, right? Like, there was this whole subcategory of like female pop star does wacky thing, and just the outrage that it seemed to cause. It seemed really disproportionate at the time, and in retrospect, it's like, this seems wildly disproportionate. And so I try. I never want to get too heavy or too pedantic or anything like that. But those are the tricky things to write about. Often before you even get to the tragedy of Sinead or Left Eye or whoever it is.
Yeah, I mean, that one act by Sinead, ripping up the Pope picture, just to see someone's career just kind of go up in flames, and there was just it was unfortunate because there was just absolutely no context to why she was doing that.
Right. Yeah.
You didn't understand it, and I understand why a lot of people are like, why are you doing that?
Sure.
Yeah, whether you're Catholic or whatever, or particularly the religious, but there was a reason that she did that.
It's like you kind of want there to have been Twitter back then, and then you also are very glad that there was not. Some context would have been helpful, but like not that much context. You know what I mean? No.
Let's do one more chapter, and then we got to take some questions here and get to the book signing, because we got a lot of folks here who want to get their book signed. Romance and Sex and Immaturity. Let's tackle that. Keep it PG-13.
Oh, totally. There she is. You want me to just my general thoughts on romance, sex, and immaturity?
Well, no, but on the songs that we're talking about, 9 Inch Nails.
Closer. Yes. Oh my. Oh wow. Wow.
And Dave Matthews Band.
Wow. Crash. Yes. Okay, so like Salt and Pepper, right? Like they're in there, right? Shoop is in there. Okay, so I talk a lot. It's probably in the book about the junior high after school gymnasium dance and how important that was to me. Like the DJ would have sirens, sitting at the table, and they would dim the lights somewhat, but someone would open up the gym doors, and like sunlight would grin, and then the doors would shut again, and there was like you were in this hermetically sealed, like hormonal atmosphere. And I'm like hugged against the wall watching all the girls line dance to Push It by Salt and Pepper. And it's there's no chance that I'm going to get up the gall to like approach anybody, and the same with Shoop, right? When that came out. And then like I get married, and I'm with my wife in the kitchen getting the kids ready for school, and my wife is singing Shoop to herself as we get the kids ready for school, and it's just such a love for me anyway, just a lovely full circle moment of like being so nervous around girls, but like having found the love of my life anyway, and now she's singing Shoop, personally to me in the kitchen as we scoot the kids off to school. I am very immature still, so that chapter resonates with me on a molecular level even to this day also. But Closer by 9 Inch Nails is one of those songs I don't have to hear ever again because it's just playing in my head all the time because I listen to it so much, and I'm aware of that not being a good thing probably, but I can't help it. But I think it is very funny that a song with that chorus was on the radio, and I heard it on the radio 20,000 times. And it's one of those songs where the radio edit is somehow dirtier than the non. It's I wanna you like I just. There's just something very dirty about that sound.
I got to ask you one more quick question, because this was such a beautiful passage that I read about Tom Petty and "It's Good to Be King." Oh, this is so moving.
Well, thank you. When I started the show, I didn't think, again, that I would really talk about myself too much, or my personal life, or my family, or my kids. And part of that was I didn't think it was really of interest to anyone, and part of that is just sort of a privacy thing. But the show is a COVID endeavor, right? But my wife was pregnant throughout the summer of 2020, and our daughter was born on Halloween of 2020. And so the show has been parallel, to the birth of my daughter, and just I got to a point where I got to that song. Okay, well, to start from the beginning, when my son was born, when my oldest was born, and they handed me my son, like I didn't know what I was going to do, and I just instinctively started singing a Tom Petty song to him. It's not like I was a Tom Petty super fan or something. I was just like, I need to sing this baby a lullaby. It's like, what lullabies do I know? And I came up with All Right for Now. And it's like, sleep tight, baby. It's on Full Moon Fever. I had the tape. And so I'm just standing there like singing this, to my newborn son. And I was thinking about that moment, and then when my daughter was born, everything turned out all right. But, my wife needed surgery, immediately after my daughter was born. So I'm holding my newborn daughter, and I don't even know if I sang to her or not. I don't remember a whole lot about what I was thinking or doing in that moment. But there was all this sort of heavy stuff happening, right when the show was first launching, and the show seemed very far away at times. But I got to a point where I wanted to do a Tom Petty episode. And I sort of knew critically that Wildflowers was like a beloved record, right? And I remember the songs on the radio at the time. But I also remember thinking when I was a teenager that Tom Petty was the oldest person I'd ever even heard of in my life. He was like in his 30s.
Yeah.
At the time, probably not even late 30s. He was probably like 25, and I was like, this man is so old. And now, and It's Good to Be King was a song that always, something about it spoke to me on the radio even when I was a 15-year-old, right? But to return to that record as an adult, as someone older than Tom Petty was then, I feel like I finally got it. Like, that's one where, like, I had to be a little older to fully grasp, what drew me to this music in the first place. And I feel like I got a lot more out of it as an adult, as a father myself, as somebody who apparently sings Tom Petty lullabies to my kids. And so It's Good to Be King episode, which was in the 50s somewhere. I was pretty far along in the podcast, but I think that was easily, the most personal one that I've ever done. And I don't think I've come close to that. I don't think I don't want to do that sort of regularly for a few different reasons, but that one really does resonate with me, and that song does. And I got a lot of really lovely messages from people. And again, it's them talking about their own experiences, whether it's, songs they sang their kids or trouble that they've had. Yeah. And it's really beautiful just to read people's stories, whatever it is and however it intersects with music, even if it's, songs I was talking about are completely different things. Like, I just really believe in just music is how everything's been filtered. Everything in my life has been filtered through music, and it's so cool to hear other people's stories about how it's true for them as well.
Nicely said. Let's take some questions, and then we'll finish off with our book signing. We're going to have you.
Yes. Let me turn this
got
on.
a microphone that we will.
Yeah, so we're going to actually do the Q&A. You're going to line up along this aisle here. We're going to do it for about 10 to 15 minutes, and then we'll start the book signing. So if you want to line up.
Yeah, please.
Can you then prioritize us?
Just come up to the mic.
Yeah, come on up.
Thank you so much for coming to Ann Arbor.
Of course. I like your shirt.
Yeah, Modest Mouse.
Yeah, show everybody. Thank you. You didn't have to do that, but I'm glad you did.
So back in '98, I was the station manager of the student-run radio station of The Ohio State University.
Yes. That's.
And,
I don't.
We're only friends here.
I don't think this is.
I mean,
intense
Athens at
crime.
Ohio University seemed like a faraway and exotic place. That
It
had
really-
something
it was
weird
like-
on Halloween. And
Yeah, no, that's right. Then Halloween is the only time we're cooler than Columbus,
So
or drunker anyway. I guess it's the difference.
I have a good memory from that era. So I'm wondering if you have another good memory from that era that's sort of similar. But me and the other staffers from the station, we went to go see the Deftones, who was opening up for Limp Bizkit at the
Sure.
El Rosa Villa.
Oh God.
And the Deftones were good.
Sure.
Limp Bizkit,
Did they have the toilet? They probably didn't bring the toilet.
I mean, they were what you would expect.
Sure.
But as we were leaving, we had this rare opportunity. There was the lead singer from Limp Bizkit was walking along like Morse Road or whatever the El Rosa
good.
Villa was on.
Yeah.
And there was a giant puddle, and we had the opportunity to hit the giant puddle with our car and completely soak that guy.
Okay.
And it felt like a juvenile thing to do at the time.
Sure.
But I sort of feel that it's aged well. I'm
Did you
just wondering
do
if you
it?
have a similar anecdote from your sort of back catalog of stories.
Did you do it?
Yeah, we did, of course. We completely like.
Let me be clear. Fred Durst is walking along the side of the road. You approach in a car. You see Fred Durst. You see a puddle. You have the conscious thought, I am going to splash him. And then you do it.
Of course.
That's awesome. That's awesome. It's not awesome for
We
him.
were really snobby about music. So
Apparently.
there was no other choice.
That is a very intense act of music criticism, sir.
This is on the way home from the show. So
Where was he going? There's nowhere to go on Morse Road. So there's like a Mexican restaurant over there. Don't walk around the Al Rosa Villa, Fred.
yeah.
Anyway, I do not have an anecdote
Nothing.
5% that awesome, I have to say.
Thank you.
Do I have thank you. I have no equivalent anecdote, and I feel terrible, but I don't. I'm sorry. That's very impressive.
Come on forward, please.
Hey,
Buy
Rob.
his story like Kramer.
What?
Buy his story like Kramer on Seinfeld.
There we go. Yes. That story is worth at least $10,000, I think.
Hey, Rob.
Hello.
You don't know this. You've been on a lot of road trips with us.
I take that very seriously.
Yeah, there's something,
That's a
really
huge
beautiful
honor.
about listening to that show while you're like driving through a landscape, but then like going back in time in your mind. That's what I associate your show with. So it's really
That's
kind of
awesome.
lot
That's a
of good
huge honor.
memories. Yeah.
Thank you.
My question might be a little pedantic, but you are in a college town.
Okay.
And that is, I'm curious about if you've thought about, like, what are the forces that make someone become a critic? Like, what is your theory of mind of becoming a critic? Because I've noticed you have a lot of critics on your show who have seemingly photographic memory for like names and details, which I myself do not have.
Yeah.
And I thought that
They
must be a
just Google
component
it,
of
man. It's just Wikipedia.
I don't think so.
I don't know if I have a theory of mind of anything, honestly. That sounds a little too highfalutin for me. I wanted to be a critic from when I was like 14 years old, reading back issues of Rolling Stone in my orthodontist's office. That's my origin story.
Okay.
And I think I read like a kind of a dismissive review of a They Might Be Giants record. It was Apollo 18. It was like, these quirky dudes. And I'm like, I'm going to become a rock critic just to avenge this band. And that's what I did. For me, it was just I loved music so much, and I certainly wasn't going to get paid to play it or sing it for anybody. And so what else can I do? Like, I can write about it. That's all I wanted to write for Rolling Stone. When I was in high school, I applied to one college. I applied to Ohio University because it had a journalism program. I majored in magazine journalism, and I graduated in 2000, and that just gets funnier by the day.
Sadly. So.
You are not allowed to do that anymore.
Sad.
It is very strange that that's all I ever wanted to do, but it's all I ever wanted to do, And I every memory I have from when I was a baby, it feels like is musically based, right? Like it makes a lot of sense, I guess. But the critic part of it, I couldn't say. I've never been one of those critics who like could do the takedown or like hated things, And maybe that's because I'm too Midwestern nice or whatever, but I didn't want to become a critic to like tell people why they were wrong You know what I'm saying? And I don't think this show works in that vein at all. I had one guy come on and talk trash about REM for like 10 minutes, and I still get emails about it to this day. And it wasn't even me. And so I don't know if you can even call what I do now criticism in the classic sense. It's more, I don't know what it is, honestly. It's more memoir or more just, I don't know, but it doesn't feel as critical as like a Robert Christgau, or an Ann Powers. I have such respect for them. And I feel like what I do or what I've always wanted to do is slightly different, but it was more about the music than the criticism, I guess, is what I'm saying. This is all I think about, this is all I talk about to a degree, and this is all I ever wanted to write about.
Awesome, thanks.
What years did you work for the Village Voice?
I was at the Village Voice from 2006 to 2011, and they had been, they had been bought by a chain of alt weeklies, based in Denver or Phoenix or both, and it was just a very arduous corporate takeover. And I was just a guy from Ohio, and I was like, "Hey, everybody!" and everyone just grunted at me, it was a major charm offensive. I'm still thinking about the Limp Bizkit guy. I'm picturing him driving. I just can't believe this because my first job, I met my wife at the first newspaper on Morse Road. We were like a half mile from the Al Rosa Villa, and I want to know where Fred was going. There's nowhere to go. It's not like there's a gas station. There's like a hotel. Like, don't go there. Even Fred Durst doesn't want to go there. I'm sorry, but I'm going to be thinking about this all night now.
Please.
Good evening, Rob. I am an under 30-year-old who once DM'd you on Twitter about Good Morning Captain.
Yes.
My question is about the state of music journalism and criticism today. Do you believe that we have learned the right lessons from the 90s and the year of the week of the woman in a sort of post-pitchfork, post-criticism, social media era?
It's Pitchfork hit me hard, because I worked for the Village Voice. The Village Voice is gone. The paper I met my wife at in Columbus is gone. Mostly, I worked at Spin for a little bit, but it was after it was in print and it had been bought by people. Like I worked at Deadspin and Hulk Hogan like sued it into the ground. Like just bizarre things have happened to me professionally. But Pitchfork was shocking to me because Pitchfork was so successful and so beloved and so even if you hated it because it mattered. Yep. And just the fact that they would mess with Pitchfork, like Pitchfork wasn't safe. I didn't think I was naive, but it shocked me so much. And just, like Sports Illustrated, like Vice, just like in the last 24 hours, it's dismaying what's happening right now, and so I think we're in a moment where I don't know what music criticism becomes, and how you get paid for it, right? When people come to me now, like younger people, like, how do you get into this business? I'm like, oh my God, like the path that I took is gone. Alternative weeklies like technically still exist, but not to that same degree. I don't know what to say to somebody starting now. Like get on Twitter, get on Substack. Like I feel so old even trying to wrap my head around the landscape right now, other than it's awful. As far as the lessons that we've learned from the year of the week of the woman in rock, the Britney Spears moment was very funny to me, right? We sort of realized, quote unquote, we realized that she had been treated horribly, the ugly magazine covers of the late 90s, just sort of the tabloid prurience, of the early 2000s. And then, we realized we need to apologize to her, but the apology to her is almost worse. Like we're sort of putting her in a different kind of cage now. We're like, we're so sorry, but we're still doing it. We're still treating her, as like not an object, but just some weird abstraction instead of a human being. I don't know. I think that one of the things that's so heartbreaking about Pitchfork is how Pitchfork now still, but at that time was so wonderful because it had broadened its horizons in terms of who wrote for it, in terms of who was editing for it, in terms of what they took seriously, and like all these conversations about poptimism, and people suddenly writing a lot about Taylor Swift, about Drake, about Beyonce, about popular music. Like I know people get tired of hearing about the same old people, but just the idea that you would take Beyonce as seriously as Neil Young. That wasn't a thing in the 90s. In the 90s, I grew up on Rolling Stone, on Spin, and I love those magazines and I love those writers. But there was a very narrow view of what like serious music was. Serious music was like Pavement or whatever. And I love Pavement very much. But the idea, that you can apply the same rigor and the same, level of depth of thought to any kind of music, to pop music, to rap music, to R&B. Like, I do think I read so much beautiful writing about so many different things written by so many different people now. And that's a wonderful thing. And I just hope that survives, even if like the foundation of how to pay for it, like just the bottom has fallen out in a way that I'm just dismayed by. I'm optimistic, and pessimistic, in equal severe measure, I guess.
One final real quick question, okay? And because we got to get rolling, so you've got time to get your books signed, so please.
Hey, Rob, I'm Rich. Thanks for coming out
Hello.
here. So I'm here with my daughter, and we have a quick two-part question.
Okay.
She wants to know what your favorite song of the 1990s is.
Oh, no.
I want to know, if you were listening to a radio station and it played every song of the 90s, which song would come on that you would have to slap at the radio the hardest to change the channel real fast?
I'll answer the slap the radio question first. It's Cotton Eye Joe. It is. You know what did it for me? They're Swedish. Those guys, it's rednecks with an X, and they were from Sweden. I was like, hell no. They were. I had no idea. It was like dudes in Sweden being like, let's do like a disco country. Come on. God. It's disrespectful.
Yeah.
I can hear that song at a hockey game and be like, okay, this is an okay environment for Cotton Eye Joe. But generally, no. Not the car, no. It's probably Birdhouse in Your Soul by They Might Be Giants. I talk about it in the book. People ask me sometimes, like, do I try and get my kids into music? And, like, I've tried hard not to be, like, the dad who gets them, like, a Sonic Youth onesie, and, like, you need to listen to this. Like, Pavement is the, like, I try not to be that guy. But I love that they got into They Might Be Giants kind of organically and, like, through the kids' albums and everything. But it's clear to me, after doing this show for 3.5 years, like, They Might Be Giants as a band, I've seen the most live. I've listened to the most. I've thought about the most. And so I think just in terms of giving that one answer, I think the answer is Birdhouse in Your Soul. If there was just a couple more questions, I can answer them. I feel bad if somebody got...
We just need to start the book signing because the library closes at 8.
Oh, dear.
So,
okay.
Yeah.
I will answer your question up there.
Yeah,
if that's,
absolutely.
Yes.
So we are going to start a line over here right in front of this table. There is like a hallway that wraps around if it's getting too long. So go ahead and start lining up. But
thank you
join
so
me
much.
in
Thank you,
I really
Rob.
appreciate it.